Now with this, you'll be able to see fairly easily, if I line the string up, that the stabilizer is way to the left, and it's just not aligned. And after a shot or two, you'll start to see that the string groove will be to the right of the string, and it's just not going to line up. So this leads to tuning issues that I'm going to cover on how we were able to compensate not being in alignment. If you actually align the string to the riser holes, you can see that we're basically shooting into the riser, and his sight would have to be so far over to the right that this just wasn't feasible. The reason I don't want to grind the limb again or try to shim it is on the wooden bow, the poundage was fairly low and little, and it was easier to lock the bow down. But as Drew went up in poundage from 16-pound limb, 18-pound limb, to then a 20-pound limb, it was harder to get the limb to lock down and stay tight, just because these are kind of inexpensive risers and bushings and threaded screws. And so the limb would become loose and then start to move, and that would mess up his groups and his shooting. So going with the cartel riser, we just decided to just deal with the limbs being twisted and tune the bow accordingly based on groups, based on the center shot, which is actually a little bit more in than I would normally do, and plunger setting that's different, which is now grouping really well at 20 yards. And I don't have to worry about this mishmash of tune, because it's not like Drew's going to shoot 20 yards and then 30 meters, 50 meters, 70 meters. He doesn't have to go all the distances. He's only going to shoot one distance, and that's 20 yards. And if he decides to shoot an outdoor tournament where we have to shoot 30 meters, then I will tune the bow for that distance only. Now, this stabilizer isn't exactly straight. It points also a little bit to the left, so it makes this alignment look even worse. But this is still a very consistent grouping bow once we took into account to align it to the way Drew shoots and the way the bow wants to shoot. Now, one of the things I had to compensate for, that since the string is over to the left and I'm just leaving it as it is and almost setting up the tune slightly to the left of the bow, was that the arrow rest, the Hoyt Super Rest, with that angle, wanted to put the arrow near the end too far out on the tip. So I had to use an extra spacer to put in to move the whole rest over, so that the arrow, when it sat naturally, wasn't on the tip but was actually centered where it should be on the rest. So you may find that you have to do that as well when you have a bow that's not in alignment and not going to be. So the alignment for this bow is pretty much a string width beside the holes on the riser. And what I did was I moved the rest so that it, in its natural place, was where the arrow would sit. And then the arrow is lined up with this alignment versus where the string is over the holes, which is shooting into the riser itself. And this actually ended up working very well. Make sure that the plunger is dead center on the arrow itself. Made sure that the knocking point was decent so that it didn't go too much up or too much down, and that he could make 20 yards with where the sight was, which is not too bad. And then I set the center shot exactly along with the string. Now, I did move the limbs a little bit and set the string in each of the limb grooves to start with. If he starts shooting and it starts to drift to the left, then I just leave it the way it is. But I first set the arrow exactly center. And then I put in a light plunger and let him shoot. And he shot some groups. And then I moved the arrow slightly outside to the left, and I let him shoot, and we looked at the groups. And then we adjusted the plunger some to see if the groups would tighten up or not. And then I moved the arrow slightly inside and I let him shoot and to see what the groups were. And basically I was just looking for about a hand width spread stretched out, about 6 inches spread of arrows on the target, not counting a couple of strays that youth archers are going to shoot. And then we would adjust the plunger stronger or weaker to see if that tightened up the groups or spread them a little. And then that was it. And for the stabilizer, I'm not really going to do anything. I don't really care that it's pointing out to the left. At full draw, it doesn't bother him. And you can see when he's shooting that when he's at full draw and ready to shoot, the bow appears to be lined up. The arrow and the string, everything looks pretty much straight to target. Later, I may adjust this stabilizer a little bit, but it's never going to be lined up because there just isn't this kind of quality in a starter bow. So this ended up being our last session where he shot really well and had 2 personal bests, one back to back. So this setup and alignment and center shot appears to be the most forgiving for him, even though it's a little bit to the left, and you would think that would make him shoot to the right, but somehow it goes in the middle. And this is just as good as it's going to get, and then this is what we will use for the next 2 years until he's bigger and can shoot the red bow, which has limb adjustments and that we've already set up and will be much better for having some alignment. This is with the arrow pointing a little more in. That's at 9 o'clock in the yellow. Okay, that's 8 o'clock in the yellow. Okay, that's actually 3 o'clock in the yellow, so that's good. Now you're centered on either side of the yellow. Yes, that's 9 o'clock in the yellow again. Okay, because this bow is shooting slightly into the riser. So he started out where the center shot should be, and then I've gone in a little bit inside for the center shot. And that's grouping really well for the way this bow is shooting. There you go, another one right in the 9 o'clock yellow. That's it? Okay. Okay, so here's how the bow is shooting. And you can see that most of the group is the 9 o'clock yellow. So if we took out like this is really where the bow is shooting. So he's a little bit 9, 8 to the left. So we'll make the plunger a teeny bit weak and see if that moves the center group over. Yeah. Nice. 9 o'clock in the yellow. So that's probably about the best we can do for the alignment on this bow. And then we'll just see if we can move the sight to get you a little more centered. That's 9/8 liner 3 o'clock. So we're basically either one edge of the yellow or the opposite edge, but that's good. We can't really change the limbs unless I grind on the limb pocket. Stabilizer is a little bit off to the left. All we want to do is get it so that the bow is basically throwing the arrows at 20 yards in the center. Good. Okay. Remember to keep the bow arm rotated. When you go up, it says you come down, rotate the elbow. Yep, rotate the elbow as you come down. It's nice and smooth, easy shot. Nice and smooth. Rotate the elbow. There you go. Nice, right in the yellow. That's a 10. Nice. Yeah, stand up straight. there you go. Okay, so here the arrows are basically center to slightly left. So he's looking at the 10 ring over to the 8 ring with 1-7 outlier. So the group is basically centered, just slightly to the left. Really good consistent shots. So then they'll group together, and then we can make adjustments on the bow. Nice. Yep, that's an 8. Nice. I think the bow is pretty much tuned as well as it's going to get. We'll make a little adjustment on the long rod to get it a little more in line. Nice, another 8. Okay, that's the final tuning. The bow is grouping center. Nice. And then we're going to go down here and see what we got. And then here's the basic bow groups. So it's pretty much right in the center. The spread is about hand width. And even this low one here, a little bit blue, shooting with no clicker. This is excellent for that bow not being aligned and shooting into the riser. So this is as good as it's going to get, and this is what we'll work with now to get him ready for Vegas. Thanks for watching.